You received a call from an inmate at the Department of Corrections. This call will be recorded and monitored. If you wish to block any future calls of this nature, dial 7 now. To accept this call, press 5 now. To decline this call, hang up.
Hi, Tony. Oh, I'm doing just fine. Yeah, things go on, and there's a lot of bad stuff going inside that prison, and so it's up to you guys to let me know what's going on, and then I can get it out there the best I can. So we're trying to keep the public informed, and as long as you pay attention and write things down and share it, I think we'll be accomplishing our goal. Oh yeah, yeah. That's something that really doesn't surprise me. But to have local juvenile detention officials mistreating the people that are incarcerated in juvenile hall or the juvenile detention center, that's scary because they really need good support. They're lost, looking for some guidance, and have people take advantage of it like that. It just kind of makes you wonder how selfish people can be. Well, yeah, I just happen to know a couple of people that were victims of these two folks. Unfortunately, both of them have since passed away, so I'm not exactly sure if it will count as justice, I guess you could say, because we're going after the institution that enabled it, because the county should have kept better watch on that, but they didn't. And so this got out there. And that's something that I'm sure the courts are going to look into. But now there's surveillance cameras, and we've had several people that talked about putting surveillance in depth, probably even body cams, into the prisons and these juvenile detention centers and the jails, maybe even the children's centers, because this stuff is now coming out against the children. And when you have a federal prisoner like George Santos, he came out and said that there was some bad conditions going on in prison. And I'm pretty sure anybody who goes to prison will immediately see that. But coming out, it's more or less like you knew what you were doing when you committed the crime. You knew there was a cost, and you get what you deserve. But the underlining fact is people who go to prison don't lose their rights. There's a few privileges that they lose, and there's a few rights that don't apply to them while they're in prison. But getting out of prison, their rights are still there. And if it could cause a problem, I'm sure they'll hold back on a lot of stuff. And there's not a lot of people that will argue with that. A person who commits a crime, goes to prison, and gets out and can't vote. There's people that oppose that, and there's people that really don't care, and then there's those who support it. But getting certain licenses or being able to carry a
You have
weapon,
60 seconds remaining.
these are rights that are up for debate. But children shouldn't be abused like that. They shouldn't be sexually abused. They shouldn't be mentally abused, and they shouldn't be scared into doing things they shouldn't be doing. And these two people, they offered them goods and services, and then they just took advantage of their authority.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
But the mental well-being works on both sides, because we've got people that are just, when they get around kids, they just can't control themselves, And then there's those that are good, outstanding people, and we need to show the difference between them, and we need to emphasize that. So hopefully these lawsuits against these abuse against children will bring some change. And that's the best thing I can hope for right now. Oh yeah, definitely. Keep posting it. We need to hear.
Thank you for using Inmate Call. Goodbye.
Hello, welcome to AQS Inmate Call, and I'm your host Joel Wilborn. And this episode is a little disturbing because it's based on some stuff that's happened for several years. It's one thing to have something happen, like as bad as it is, you have a person that's maybe stabbed, and then the defendant goes on trial, and then the victim's family and the victim will have to go through some kind of healing process. But the stabbing is done, and if there's a conviction or death of the suspect, there's a possibility that that incident is isolated and gone. But imagine several years being abused by a system that really should be trusted by the community. I mean, you got law enforcement that should be trusted, and you have the penal system with prison guards that should be trusted. And so I concentrate on agencies that the public shouldn't have to second guess, and that's like the justice system, the penal system, and we want to let the public know when something goes wrong in there, so that through the court system we can help fix this problem so it won't bother people in the future. That's what we're looking for. Now, this particular case that was brought to my attention by one of the victims, I'll read you part of a newspaper article. It says at least 15 children incarcerated at the Spokane County Juvenile Detention Center were groomed and sexually abused by guards at the facility over the span of 3 decades, according to a complaint filed in Spokane County Superior Court. The lawsuit names the 15 plaintiffs by initials and seeks damages from Spokane County. For 3 decades, defendant Spokane County employed multiple serial sex predators and granted them nearly unfettered power over children and adolescents helplessly locked in cells at the Juvenile Detention Center, the complaint alleges. 2 guards in particular, William Lamb and Raphael Gray, exploited the power granted them by defendant Spokane County to groom and sexually abuse generations of kids, crimes ranging from the 1980s to at least 2010. Both Lamb and Gray have since died. The guards openly flirted with the child inmates and provided candy cards and extra time out of their cells, according to the lawsuit. The sexual abuse allegedly occurred throughout the detention center, including in cells, closets, and a guard booth. The complaint called the abuse the product of extraordinary negligence and a continuing failure by the county to protect vulnerable boys and girls who were 12 to 17 when they were raped by the guards. Now, hopefully people will see that that's not right. And no matter what these kids did, and you could think of the worst crimes, maybe a 16-year-old raped a 12-year-old girl and was put in a detention center. And then one of these 2 officials abused him. And I don't know. I can't say, well, let's not worry about that because this person committed rape. But in a jail, they're usually waiting to go to trial. And a few of them, they're in there just for a little while because they were sentenced and they got 3 months in jail. And to think that these kids would go in there, get out, reoffend, because that shows you right there's a problem, and then go back in. Now, something like this, it goes in the news a lot. You see negligence because a person dies. And I know a couple of people whose family members died in a prison cell or a jail cell, and they want to sue the county, state, federal government for compensation. And, we go back to the federal prison that just was it just housed a lot of sexual abuse. And I'm glad it's coming out. I'm glad there's a lot of people that are bringing this to the public's attention. And it takes a lot, because when this was shared with me, one of the victims who was in this jail at the time, during this time period, she was saying, well, these 2 never sexually assaulted me, but I did get treats, and I was able to stay out of my cell a little longer than the other folks. And they did kind of talk about certain things, but I didn't see this as is abusive. And when you're dealing with somebody that long, I mean, they're talking 30 years. These folks, they learn stuff. And then when somebody gets away with something, they might want to brag about it, and then somebody else will get away with it. So it scares me to think that juvenile detention center going through this abuse. Imagine being at home going through this abuse. You know, I have a few of the podcasts and some of my YouTube videos where we're listening to victims describe the way they were treated at home or the way they were treated by officials that they trusted. It could be somebody in their church or somebody in their school or even a next door neighbor. And these things will go on for like 30 years if nobody talks about it. The kids could, in some cases, consider that normal. Others could be too afraid to say anything. Or others could have thought, well, this is nice. I get all these privileges, and all I have to do is just appease this person. And that could be their idea of survival. I don't know. Every person has their own reason for doing something. And we, the public, don't necessarily have to understand it. And for them to explain it to us doesn't necessarily mean that that's their mission in life. Everybody's individual. Everybody has their reasons. And we have to respect that. But if these kids are being abused and they don't know it, that's a whole different story. And those who are just going along with it, we need to address that as well. So this kind of treatment shouldn't go on no matter what. But it's an issue on both sides. The children have an issue and the people who are abusing them have an issue, and it needs to be addressed. We can't just ignore this. We can't. And when you talk to folks that deal with people who are, let's say, homeless or drug addicts or even prostitutes, and something happens to them, the public tends to think, well, these folks are just kind of the lowlifes of society. We need to understand that all people are created equal. We, just because of our gender or just because of our status in life, we shouldn't be treated any differently from anybody else. And the people living on the street, they have rights, they have opinions, they have feelings, and those need to be respected. And if a kid's living on the street, commits a crime, goes to a juvenile detention center and gets abused, I mean, some of these kids were raped and they were forced to perform sexual acts in front of these officials. And these are children. And this was going on and nobody was reporting it. And it could be going on at a juvenile detention center right down the road from you. It could be going on at your next door neighbor's house. It's like the saying, you see something, you say something. I think getting the word out that these people are being abused, these human beings, I think that's going to help prevent something like this from happening in the future. Imagine if my two friends who had been through this had spoken to, let's say, you, said, oh yeah, when I was locked up in juvenile hall, I had to have sex with this other person while the guards watched. I think you would say something to the person who told you that, and most likely say something to the officials. I doubt you would just say, oh, well, these things happen and move on. And in order to get that kind of conversation started, we need to share this information so that maybe if somebody's having this discussion and there's a person sitting in there listening to it, thinking that happened to me 3 years ago, I thought it was okay. I thought that was a part of being locked up. That's what you had to go through. I didn't know this was an illegal act. I didn't know this was wrong. And they'll start that conversation because we prompted by talking about it, by bringing this up. It's even something you could talk about at the dinner table. And if a person goes to juvenile detention center, you should debrief the person upon release. What happened to you in there? What'd you think? Is there anything you want to talk about? How was your health? Prison officials should discuss that stuff because a lot of these kids, they'll go from the detention center to prison. And before getting in the prison, they should talk about stuff like this. And if they're getting a lot of, everything was fine, there was no problem, then, you move on. But if they're thinking everything was fine because I had to do these things in there or these things happened to me and there's nothing I can do about it, and they don't know, but if they watch a video on YouTube or listen to a podcast and they hear people talk about this stuff and they're thinking, this is a major lawsuit and this exact thing happened to me, that's good to get that out there. That's what we need to do. And that's what the purpose of this podcast is, to let folks know that when children are locked up, they're not supposed to be treated like that. They're supposed to get their food, their health, maybe even some training, but not things that these kids were going to. And these people, I don't think they really did a really good background check on them, or even just checked on them like they should. You check on the incarcerated people, but you need to check on the folks that are watching them too. I mean, you said like some of these people said one of the deceased men forced them to perform oral sex and masturbation and were digitally penetrated and raped. Many were abused repeatedly and some over years as they cycled in and out of the facility. Some plaintiffs said they were sexually abused by multiple employees at the center. One of the girls that reported this to me said when she got out, she moved in to the home and started a sexual relationship with one of these guys. I mean, that's unacceptable. And even though there's not too much we can do to what happened to these kids, we can share it and prevent it from happening to others. And I like that idea. So get out, talk to folks. If you know anybody that's been the juvenile, have them watch this case. Go online, look at some videos, try out some podcasts, and then share it. Get the word. Like the old saying goes, knowledge is power. If you want to prevent abuse, if you want to prevent future crimes, let people know when there's something going on in their life. It's a shame that kids go through so much abuse in their life, they think this kind of stuff is normal. And they think it's okay that an adult can do these things. That's not right. And we have the power to change this. We can end this cycle. And so if you get a chance to surf the internet, check out this Spokane County Juvenile Detention Center and this ongoing litigation, and check out anything in your neck of the woods as well. Just once in a while, just do a search of the jails and the facilities in your state. And if you notice anything unusual, like some complaints that people are sharing with the news or lawsuits, start the conversation going. Reach out to these folks, especially if somebody goes to prison and you have a chance to get on to Securus or write a letter. And then we'll be on the path to healing, and we'll be on the path to preventing this stuff from happening. People shouldn't be afraid to speak out, especially when it involves their health and well-being. That's important. Well, thanks for tuning in, and have yourself a marvelous day, and make wonderful memories for tomorrow.